Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, ActiMet, an athlete wellness and performance monitoring system. ActiMet allows players to share their training load, training intensity and highlight issues away from sport, empowering management to help players in a safe, secure and private manner. Players input their performance and wellness data on an easy-to-use mobile app. ActiMet is an affordable monitoring system at less than €50 a month and is currently used by county and All-Ireland champions and over 50 soccer academies worldwide. For more information, please visit actimet.com for more. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On episode 66, I am delighted to be joined by Irish Senior Soccer International and qualified doctor Ciara Grant. Since recording this podcast, Ciara has made history and signed a professional contract with Rangers Football Club in Scotland. Ciara is one of the most impressive and most talented guests I've had on to date, so I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hi Ciara, thanks a million for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Orla. Lovely to be here.
Before we get into everything, I like to give the guest 30 or so seconds to give their sort of elevator pitch introduction for the listeners who might not know who they are.
So Ciara Grant, hail from Donegal, living in Dublin now the last 8 years. I am a footballer for Shelburne and the senior women's national team, and also qualified as a doctor. And that's kind of mostly part of me.
Growing up, who got you involved in sport? Who was the biggest influence at that point?
I suppose probably unconsciously it was my older brother and my dad. I have 3 brothers, 2 younger, 1 older, and there's photos of me in the house with a ball and bandages on my knees from maybe 3 upwards. I luckily grew up just in the outskirts of Letterkenny, but we had a football pitch that I don't know would have been classified as an actual pitch, but we played there for about 15 years. It was a hill. We used to tactically use the puddles and the trees on the sideline. Sometimes you had to take throws off the ground because the trees were in the way. But no, so that was right next door my house, and then at the bottom of the street there was 5 or 6 AstroTurfs that used to have training sessions on 3-4 times a week. Anthony Gorman ran training sessions Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I suppose I can't say when a moment or who. Mum said my parents are very cool and open people, and I came home from school, my friend was learning the piano. I wanted to try the piano. They'd let me try that for a week or 2 until I decided I was no good at the piano. And then, so I played basketball, soccer, Gaelic, athletics, swimming, karate. I think I lasted in Irish dancing for about 10 days. So just pretty much anything. As you can tell, I didn't like to sit still too often.
Yeah, definitely not. And when did you start to focus in on soccer and Gaelic? Because I know they were kind of your focus for a couple of years.
I suppose in school, soccer definitely was always the first love, and I was known in all the Gaelic teams as a soccer player, and probably for the way I played Gaelic and for my just love of it. But in secondary school, then you really it was just getting a bit too much. At one stage, I was playing 3 different sports with school teams and club teams, and I got really, really bad shin splints and TY, that to the extent where I had to take a rest from sport for about 5 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really bad. I could barely get up the stairs in school. And then we were doing really well with the international under-17s team, and once we got through the first qualifying round, I think we all kind of consciously then made a decision that if we want to get to the Euros or if we want to get to the World Cup, we're going to have to make some sacrifices. And that's when I really started focusing on soccer. But in Donegal, there wasn't much happening. Breach McGinty had set up a lot of the women's stuff. But our Irish manager at the time had also let us still play for Donegal because the training sessions were so well structured and intense. And then coming up to the soccer competitions, it was all soccer. Mm-hmm. And then once I hit university, it was one or the other. And I got a soccer scholarship to UCD, and that was it. I didn't play for another 6 years, I think, after that.
Yeah. And do you think there was much benefit in keeping up? I know, for example, with the shin splints, obviously that's not ideal. You don't want that to happen. But was there a benefit of you playing not only multiple sports growing up, but until the teenage years having 3 different sports together?
Absolutely. Everything complements everything, really. Basketball, I only started playing it when I was 12, when the local club was starting up and they came to our primary school. And to be honest, I absolutely love basketball. It's one of my favorite sports. But even if you think about the footwork, the pace of thought, the pace of pass, everything, the intermittent training that you're getting done without you even realizing it, definitely helped me in my soccer, say technical ability in soccer, vision in soccer. And then, Gaelic, again, it's just such a great sport. It's just like everybody in Ireland, I think, loves Gaelic. But yeah, like I think they all complement each other, but it definitely does get to a point, like as you said, I was playing, potentially 6, 7 games a week plus training sessions. It's just not doable. And then you start realize, or like, it gets to a stage where you're kind of plateauing and you're just tired and you're not really playing well. Like I remember going up to school's training session at Sloan, and the manager was giving us all feedback and he turned to me and he was like, "And you need to rest." Because I think I'd gone to like an Ulster basketball training session for like 3 hours on the Friday night in Sligo, and then drove to Athlone to train with the Irish team for like 3 hours. And I was just,
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
my mom was like, "Yeah, you're a lunatic," but there was no telling the otherwise.
Yeah.
But I think now teenagers, like even talking to the girls in Shelburne, they have such a better understanding of even diet, nutrition, training, types of training, rest and recovery. Like we hadn't a clue. Like we were
Yeah.
just going with the flow, saying
Yeah.
yes to everyone around us, and and it does boil up at a point.
Yeah, definitely. If there's any younger girls or guys listening that kind of realise, do you know what, that sounds a bit like me and I haven't hit the point where I'm getting shin splints or any other injury, how do they kind of make that decision in terms of not to quit sports but to try balance everything? Because I definitely think there's a benefit of keeping multiple sports up, but and as a coach I'm now trying to figure out with players, how do we approach the conversation of, look, you need to actually just take a rest and balance everything out.
Yeah, I suppose so. On reflection, like even over the years when I've been thinking about it, I think once the thoughts kind of start entering your mind of, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore," or like
Yeah.
there's always days where you don't want to go out in the blistering cold to train session, but there's a difference between that and then it going on for 4 or 5 days or maybe 1 or 2 weeks where you're like, I'm getting pulled in all directions here, because
Yeah.
especially in Gaelic scene, like the young talented, say 14, 15-year-olds could be on their schools, you know, like under 16 team, senior team, club 16, 17s, 18s,
Yeah.
even up to 21 senior. So there's a lot of people want the best for you, but also sometimes want the best out of you. And I think with that awareness and training, I know the GAA are doing a lot of it, and even the FAI, of just that kind of player coach education as well. And the signs of burnout, the signs of stress, because and then you add on a pandemic as well. So a lot of teenagers are probably under even more stress than we were. Um, but I think once you hit around 15, 16, even sometimes 14, depending on what level you're playing at, decisions do have to be made. And I suppose it all depends on the person. Then if they want to play elite level, it is definitely getting mainstreamed at a lot younger age. If you want to compete with the best, then you're going to have to dedicate all of your time to that sport.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're more of a recreational athlete, I think it's just about finding that balance, and then just when you're recovering, recover right.
Yeah, I love the way even you said there, it's either people want the best for you or the best out of you, and I think that's something players can kind of remind themselves of. Talk us through a little bit of college. Was that the point you obviously focused on soccer, but what was the timeline? Because I know you took a break for a couple of years, was it, at some stage?
Yeah, that was kind of coming to the end order. That was so. Yeah, so I arrived UCD in 2010, the end of 2010, and so luckily got an Ad Astra scholarship, which was top class. I ended up living with some amazing athletes like Paul Donovan, Ciara McGee, and Katie Mullen. Like
Wow.
it goes on. It's incredible. Noel McGrath, Killian Buckley, like
Yeah.
everyone. We were all just living in the same apartments. So that environment straight away to me was quite elite. It helped me bridge the gap from underage international to senior international. And by second year in college, I'd made my first cap for Ireland. It was lovely balance with soccer, with the college work and soccer. Everything was in kind of almost a triangle between our building, our accommodation, the building, and the gym.
Okay,
Um,
brilliant.
you could get naps in. You could, pick and kind of choose what you're going to do. We had a one-on-one S&C coach. We had access to kind of all sports science and laboratory and stuff as well. But yeah, and even exam kind of like they help us. I remember one time me and my friend Dora Gorman, who was on the Irish team as well, we did an exam in Irish camp. where an invigilator came out. So like things like
Wow.
that. Yeah, they really tried to get the whole elite athlete balanced, and the likes of Ciara McGeehan was able to, and Paul Dunn, I think, spread some of their years. So instead of
Mhm.
doing a year in 12 months, they did it in 24 months, just allow them for training in whatever competitions they had.
Mhm.
But then it was just all coming again, kind of like those teenage years. It was kind of getting to the stage near the end of my final year in college where I was just wrecked, I think, and I was starting to not enjoy football anymore. It became that thing where I had to do, and I suppose there was some external pressures on me to keep playing. And obviously, when you've been playing your whole life, to even consider not playing it is something, it's kind of a lot of athletes have to go through, but it's quite hard. So yeah, so I took the league was luckily changing from a summer or winter league to summer league, so it worked out perfectly. So with Christmas and my final year, I decided not to go back for my last semester, knowing that it was a big 6 months for me, and then we were starting our internship. But then Orla, in I think about 3 weeks after I decided I was not playing soccer, I joined the UCDB Gaelic team. Uh, oh, it was the best crack ever because they were all in first or second year, and I was
Yeah.
the oldie in sixth year. They were like, "I didn't even know college went to 6 years," and I was like, "I know." And it was just a new lease of life for me because
Yeah.
I had no pressure on me. It was crack. They were carefree, kind of,
Yeah.
younger girls coming in. And yeah, and kind of relit my love for Gaelic as well. And then within a few months, Maxie Curran had kind of called me and was asking me back into the Donegal setup. So then at the start of 2019, so no, 2018, sorry, in January, I went and went back playing for Dublin or for Donegal, and we beat Dublin in our first game in Croke Park. So, and that's
Yeah.
probably there was one of the highlights of my Gaelic careers. But yeah, so that was kind of the college scene. And look, I would absolutely recommend anybody to go to UCD, and DCU. I hear great things about DCU as well. But just the dedication they're putting towards our athletes and student athletes is great. And you can do both. And you see the likes of, there you have Paul O'Donovan, Katie Mullen,
Yeah.
absolutely excelling in both. So it can be done.
I love the way to mention the Dublin loss there. It's all right, Kier. In terms of living with that calibre of athlete, that's really interesting. And I'd say I've heard of other athletes the same, and this environment that's created. Was there anything in particular you picked up from living with that calibre of athletes? Like you've mentioned 3 Olympians there straight off the
Yeah.
bat.
I think especially Ciara McGeehan is somebody that I always think back on because when I was living with her, she had her really bad Achilles injury.
Yeah.
And I can't explain to you the dedication and hard work and focus she had to get back. Grueling gym sessions of kind of repetitive, monotonous exercises to get that Achilles going again, and then for only the rehab to fail, to try some injections to go for surgery. And she just kept working, but also maintained such a lovely persona. And she's the bubbliest. Everything you see in the media about Ciara is who Ciara is. Like she's just loves her homeland, loves Camogie, and she's incredible. And then the likes of, for me, even say Paul O'Donovan, like weight categories and things like that, and things you have to think about, and even just individual athletes, they're a whole
Yeah.
other, kettle of fish than
Yeah,
than
they really are.
they really are. Their mindset is, sometimes I'm like, whoa, you people are crazy. But also I'm like, whoa, that's very admirable. And
Yeah.
definitely have, as the older I've gotten, probably the things I've taken off them have
Mhm.
definitely come into light. And it's great, even like when I got back in the Irish team, like, I bumped into Katie Mullen in the hotel we were staying in. And it's just like even talking to her, and it was just, she'd just come back from, the Olympics and all. And just to have those connections. And even Jeremy Duncan, a hockey player I played with, he was similar to me. He kind of he actually took a bit longer out from the Irish scene, and then he got himself back up to fitness, and then he went over to Belgium to play, and now he's back in the Irish setup. So,
Mm.
it's just even to have, like, yeah, as you said, you couldn't ask for a better network of people. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. You did mention getting into college. I skipped a step because I always love talking through kind of secondary school leaving cert stage because a lot of my listeners would be of that demographic.
Yeah.
Talk us through deciding to do medicine. What was the thinking behind it, and how did you balance everything and studying? Because it's not like you didn't do anything to study for leaving cert. You got the top course.
Yeah, like I think everyone's so different. So I never really had medicine on my mind. When I
No.
got those stints in TY, I was thinking physiotherapy pretty much just because I was working with a lot of physios. I enjoyed it. And then, as I kind of painted, like I was quite a relaxed teenager. I never put too much pressure on myself, but I was like, I even think I worked harder back then than I do now sometimes. but every hour to me was just time that I could use. So between school, I'd stay in school for an extra hour and a half to get my homework done. I'd have brought, preparation. I'd have brought some food. My mum would have picked me up, brought me to training, and then after training, and like I even think back to the crazy things. We used to watch Desperate Housewives in the house, or Lost, or whatever was on. And every 15-minute break on RT, I would either like run, dry my hair that I had the shower before, and then come back next break, run, brush my teeth, and then as soon as it was over, I was like, okay, night family, bye. Like I was definitely a bit crazy, but like then on Saturdays, I used to go to all the 18ths and stuff, like have, well, as much of a social life as I could.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I'd get up early on a Sunday, get 4 hours of study done, and then that would be me done for the day.
Wow.
And then I'd be ringing my friends, being like, "Do you want to go for a drive or something?" And they're like, "Kier, like, are you not studying?" Well, like,
I'm done.
Yeah, I'm done today. And but lots of my friends were like, "Well, I only got up at like 1 o'clock," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, yeah, well, I for like 5 hours." So, so it's just kind of making use of your time,
Yeah.
but then also being kind to yourself and just being like, "I've done enough this week." And then like, see if you've had a busy day, busy few weeks, or even a day in school and studying, getting out there on the pitch is just the best thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And even as like kind of subtle motivations to work, you're like, okay, I have a match on Saturday. I need to get this all done before the match because I don't want to be thinking about it before the match.
Yeah.
Or I used to kind of get travel sickness, but then I figured out if I put in my earphones and listen to music, I could get a bit of work done on the buses too, especially coming from Donegal for Gaelic, we could be traveling the length of the country.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just setting a focus, and definitely do not drop the sport you're playing. Like if anything, take up sports. For people who don't play too much sports, exercise is the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
And then just planning. So on a Sunday night, sit down, watch your plan for the week. What are your academic things you have to do? And then what sporting trend you have.
Mm-hmm.
And then night before, get the bag set out, whatever clothes you need, boots, whatever for the day, done the night before. So when you wake up, you just grab your stuff, get a breakfast and head out the door.
Yeah.
But I had great support systems around me. Like my teachers, when I went away, like I missed the first 5 weeks of leaving cert.
Okay, right.
Because we were away at the World Cup, and I had teachers, meet with me after school for one-on-one sessions. I had stuff sent over to me, kind of week 1 over there, try and get these questions done in week 2. And then I also, so like, say Dora Gorman, I mentioned, like she was very, very academic. She got the highest, points in Ireland. Whereas for me, I'm not that academic, but I am quite hardworking and, as I said, organized. But then I made the decision after TY, I was like, I'm not good at languages. Why would I try and struggle to maybe, get a C or high C? I don't know what the grades have all changed now.
Yeah.
So, and again, my parents trusted pretty much anything that I wanted to do. So I dropped to pass French and pass Irish, took up LCVP because I knew if I could do all the work in 5th year, I'd try to get a distinction. That was the equivalent of like, I think,
got an LCVP. I did that as well. It was great.
Great one for the extra point. And then I just picked a subject that I knew I liked. Like I loved art, but it was going to be too much work. And I just didn't have the time. So I dropped that as well. And I just kind of played the Leaving Cert like a game. It was a bit practical. And since then I've had a few of my friends' little sisters, or even friends of mine that are younger, who did the same thing. They dropped their language to lower because they could spend hours and hours throughout the 2 years and still only scrape maybe a C1.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth it, where you can put that energy and time that's already limited from your sport into something else. So
you're right, it is a strategy in a game, but I'm really impressed with even like I'm the total opposite. If I had an hour, I'd be like, oh my god, how am I going to get anything done in an hour? And I'd spend the whole hour contemplating how I'd get nothing done, and then have to leave and then actually do nothing. But
that's not all in my adult life. Back in my teenage life, I didn't.
But where did you learn that from a young age? Like your like attitude and like drive just seems to, was that always there?
I honestly don't know, because my parents, I don't think they instilled it in me. My older brother definitely didn't. I don't know. I think the Irish setups, like, when you're a young age and you get these opportunities, even interprovincials, to mix with people from all over the country, you come from a small town and suddenly you realize, whoa, there's so many more talented people out there who, even though like you might be the best person at sport in your town at your age group, then you meet somebody else and you're like, whoa, they're way better than me. They're like, so you learn stuff off them as well. And yeah, like I suppose, like, some of those people, like on my under-17 Irish team, we have, I think, 3 doctors, 2 physios, solicitor, like it was a radiographer, like it was quite a academic group. But I also think, we pushed each other a little bit. in a very, very good way and kind of supporting way. And I suppose even for me, the encouragement to go for physio and go for medicine, whereas I would have been like, absolutely, like, even some of my teachers, I think, were like, sorry, what? Like, you know, even like one of my best friends when I got into medicine was like, nah, you didn't. And I was like, yeah, I did.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's
yeah,
mad. And I love the way you attribute that to your environment and setup. Like, even when you mentioned the Irish team there, because I had a really good chat with Damien Hughes, and we were talking about how environments and exposing kids to environments at a young age can really influence them. And that seems to be like, even now with the Irish team, like, you look across, and professionals, well, obviously they play professionally, so that's obviously going to elevate your game. But from a younger age, that seems to be really like just getting down to Donegal and seeing, even like you mentioned, the World Cup. That must have just expanded your mind and your attitude.
Even just see different cultures, different people, like, it was just incredible. But it's actually like, it's kind of come full circle, because I was in with as the doctor for the under-17s women's team back at the start of the year, just kind of when things started opening up again, and we had two girls from Donegal, and one girl was quite shy, from way more remote than I am. And then you have to bear in mind that these girls, they didn't get their under 15, so they've never really even left the house, they've never been away from their parents. And some of the questions they were asking me, being like, I was just going to be probing them, being like, what do you want to do after school, or did it? And I don't know, like, geez, Dublin's wide big, and kind of these answers. Yeah. And then come to the end of 10 days, and they're like almost different people. Wow. And what I used to say to them, I was like, but girls, like, you're 15 now. By the time you're 18, if you're still in the Irish team, you might have traveled to at least 10, 12 different countries. Like, nobody in your class is going to have done that. So you think now you're missing your mommy, but seeing this time next year, you're going to be running out the door.
See you later.
But what you do, and like, sure, I used to get on the bus. Mum would leave me the bus, 7:15 bus from Letterkenny up to Dublin Airport, and then make your way over to the training ground, train for 4 or 5 hours, and then get the bus back home. Yeah. And we were 13, 14, 15, whereas obviously now safeguarding and all that is coming in. Things are not more appropriate. Yeah. But it is sometimes you just like, for these kids, the experiences, like, I was coming back to secondary school as a 15, 16-year-old, and then sometimes realizing, like, I am a bit more mature than other people just because of these experiences, and pressured situations too. Like, we got to the Euro final, and as you said, went and played in the World Cup, against a country from different continents as well, and being away from home for 6 weeks at the World Cup, at the age of 17. So there's skills and things you don't even realize until you're probably my age looking back on them.
When you enter like a high performance setting, like an underage Irish team, was that something that you liked straight away? You was like, I love this level of competitiveness, I love the standard, or was it something that maybe took you a little while to get accustomed to?
No, again, Orla, as I said, the person I am, I absolutely loved it. I was like, this is great. Like, who are all these girls, and why are they all so good at football?
Maybe beat them.
Yeah. I do, because like back in Donegal, there was maybe 3 or 4 of us that played soccer, to that level. And I was playing with all the boys, and I just went along with things at that age. But it is funny when I talk to some of the girls in the team, and even Jennifer Byrne, who's Miss Rosa Tralee, she's also a qualified doctor. She was on that under-17s team with me. She would have said that she was terrified coming up, and didn't want to come for the first few camps, and thought loads of the girls were really intimidating and scary. But like, for that, Jennifer would just say that was her personality, and she again is from a very small village in Westmeath. But then, even like now, she's my age, but she was just saying that within the 2 or 3 years involved with the team, she was like a completely different person. Like, and you even see that coming in now in these little like girls that are quite shy, and then even 4 or 5 days they're suddenly best friends. Somebody from Cork's best friends with somebody from Dublin. And like, my parents are still best friends with so many of the girls from my team. Like, even for the recent games, they're up staying in Dublin with Siobhan Colleen's parents.
That's lovely.
It's brilliant, and their connections that like there for life. So
yeah, that's brilliant. You took a break and you did play intercounty football, but you went back in as team doctor. What was the thinking behind that? I know that was kind of the spark that kind of lit your fire again for football.
Yeah, so I suppose I was trying to think, once I kind of wasn't playing that high level of soccer, I was trying to think what I want to do with my career. And so I started a master's in sports medicine and wanted to get some, better experience. And the FAI had come calling to ask me to cover some of the underage team stuff, just on a kind of, ad hoc basis of when the actual team doctors couldn't do it. So it was brilliant for me getting back, and it being a footballer at the time too, you just have a better connection and understanding of how the camps work and what the girls need. And then I was asked go up and cover a home base session for the senior team. And I was sitting there watching it, and I was like, like I probably could play here. Knew I was a little bit off, like I needed to get back training, and that was when I decided. So I was playing with Science Swifts at that stage, and I wanted to get back to Dublin and play in the National League. And yeah, that was kind of my focus then for the last year and a half, was to get back on the Irish squad, and was absolutely delighted to get back in the team in June and get my first cap there against Georgia. So it was the 16th one, but just as sweet as the first, I think.
Yeah, definitely. What's it like trying to bridge that gap then? Like, I'm always interested, yes, you have team commitments and you have team training, but to improve your game at any capacity in any way, what do you do outside of the team environment even now?
So for me, I think I've taken a step away back from medicine, from work. I think recovery is a big one. I think maybe as the older you get to, like, you want adaptation from any of your training. And when I talk to the girls playing professional, like, they train maybe 30-40% of the time, and rest and recovery is a big factor in it. And I suppose when you're working a full-time job, you can't get that. If you're driving 2 hours of training, you can't get that.
Yeah.
So for me, it was trying to, just lay off the work, stay off the feet a bit more than I was, because obviously, when you're on your feet all day, I was sometimes doing 12-hour shifts and then driving straight to training, and yes, yeah, it is, and like, you might do it for a while, but I think the older I got, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd also been, achieving all those things doing it, whereas now I wanted to try and push on and see, if I can get better.
Yeah.
And even at that, like, I've been training with boys, I've been doing different things, but when you're in camp with the professionals, like, there is no, like, you can get up to that level, yes, but to sustain that level,
yeah,
like, sometimes, especially in the first 1 or 2 camps I was back, I was quite tired at the end of the camp, and I was looking forward to a day or two off. Whereas professional girls were going back to club training the next day and playing a match in 3 days' time.
Wow.
So there is big difference there as well. But yeah, no, I think just rest and recovery to me is a big factor of training. Training longer and harder is not the same thing as training smarter as well. I think some coaches don't realize that, team sports, everyone's in different position as well, so training should be tailored differently. And yeah, I just think also people need to take onus of their own training, and what they like and what they don't like, and that's obviously very hard in a team environment too, when everybody's trying to impress the manager. But just sometimes I think, and it does come with age, and it comes with obviously playing experience too, but knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you is going to help you, number one, reduce your risk of injury, and number two, get you better.
Exactly. What do you find that you've picked up from the likes of professional girls? Is there anything that you just watch them doing, or any of the girls at all, that you've picked up for yourself? Like, I'm a bit like at training, or even I go to watch other teams, and I'm like stealing everyone's secrets. But is there anything that you've found maybe over the years you've taken from people that's worked for you?
Preparation, I think, is a big one. I think there's, just turning up at a training pitch isn't good enough at the elite level.
Yeah.
And that's preparation in just organizing your gear bags, nutrition before, afterwards, sleeping as well is a big one. Yeah, it's just little. It's kind of like, I think I've read an article or listened to something with Paul Donovan too, and he said there's no magic recipe to training. It's just simplicity, and it's just doing the simple things to the best of your ability over and over again. And that really is, I think, what kind of high performance professionalism is. Even on the days you don't want to do it, they do it, and you do it to a standard. So yeah, that's what I've kind of taken away from the girls, is that it's an everyday thing. It's not just turn up when you need to.
Exactly. That's funny you mentioned that, because that's the biggest thing I've learned from the podcast here is there's nothing special about the guest. It's just they just do the same thing every day, and when you don't want to go out, you still go out. Have you listened to the High Performance podcast at all?
Yes, I have. Yes.
They do it. They talk about it all the time. It's just the same. Like, it's only not every interview is the same, but it's just the same underlying principles the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as you said, if it's not going well for you, you just keep sticking at it and go back the next day and do it again. It's a great podcast. It's excellent.
Yeah. Out of interest, when you approach a big game, like Ireland, like the World Cups you've involved, even Croke Park, is there anything particular you do in terms of your preparation?
I used to be very, very like pedantic about what time I had my food at, but I've become more relaxed in my older age. Just hydration is a big thing to me. So in the days beforehand, I would be staying very well hydrated. Usually take electrolytes, every day. Um, and then yeah, just getting sleep, getting rest, and doing some video analysis as well. I've kind of been trying to get into my game as well. Obviously with all the games this year being streamed, there's a lot more kind of analysis being done. And yeah, just sleep, rest, and then what I always like to say to myself, which doesn't always work, but like there's time to be nervous, and it's not 2 days before a big game. It's in the hours before. So even if you're going
Love
to
it.
bed before, just be like, there's no point in being nervous tonight. It's not till tomorrow. Just breathe and good night, and we'll see what happens.
That's brilliant. Is that something you've just come up with yourself? You've found it worked, or did someone tell you that?
um, it's probably a combination of like either reading or listening to different things, but it's what
Yeah.
I've always kind of done. Because again, everybody is completely different. I suppose actually Orly only started drinking coffee about 2 years ago, and which is mad. I went through the whole medicine and my not have coffee and find this wonderful potion.
You're really nuts, Ciara. I'm just getting the sense.
Just a little bit. But yeah, so coffee then, I'm sensitive to coffee, so I try and cut back on the caffeine actually before games, and then
Okay.
usually I like to take a cup about an hour beforehand or an hour and a half, just mainly from the scientific data that it increases kind of alertness and your awakeness up
Mhm.
for the game, and supposedly as well your sprint repeatability. But things like that took me maybe 6 months to realize that, like, okay, you do not need these coffees. Like, you were never an anxious, nervous person before games, and now you are. Why is that? And like, but then again, you're getting older, things start to matter a bit more to you. You don't have the next 20 years to play. So that's all kind of different factors. And yeah, I think just again finding your own routine. But I think everybody in all walks of life need to be adaptable as well. So you need to be able to react to different situations, to changing situations. And a few of my friends and people I know in both sporting and not in sporting environments find that very hard to deal with. Like, if something is just thrown in front of them. Whereas I think I learned this from my mother, is just taking a second. What is the new situation? Okay, how do we adapt and how do we change and how do we react to that?
Brilliant.
And I suppose that kind of really did pass on to them both my hospital working environment. As you know, it can be very, very hectic,
Yeah.
and sporting environment too. So
Okay, interesting. And when you get to an elite level, I'm always interested in this conversation. Is football more mental or physical?
it really depends on your position, I think. So as a central midfielder, yeah, like in big games, I would be wrecked afterwards, because like you're on the ball the whole time, and it's like some people are way better talking than others, and I do it. Like, I think communication to me is one of the biggest things in team sport, especially in soccer where things are happening so fast.
Mm-hmm.
But sure, sometimes you're trying to speak on the pitch, and I could be calling you Kelly or something, or like this word will come out of your mouth, and like, that is not what I meant, because you're so
Yeah.
stimulant the whole time. And then it is an extremely physical game. I think all female sport is becoming more and more physical. So the tackles are harder, the kicking is harder, everything, the pace of the game has shot up definitely since I last played in the National League as well. So yeah, I think that's again just kind of reiterating that I was finding it too hard to balance. Like, I have such admiration for some of the girls in the league that are working, full time
Yeah.
and playing to such high standards, because it's tiring, and it's 24/7 of your
Mm-hmm.
life.
Mm-hmm.
But no, like, yeah, just kind of both, I think, have improved, and both are challenging on the pitch.
When you get to that stage and what you've learned, just kind of looking at the underage, like when you're involved in Irish teams, is there anything as players that they're kind of overlooking, whether it's skill, any attribute that is essential to be a top level player? Is there anything that's been kind of overlooked?
I think that's one of the special things about soccer. I think that might be more in Gaelic, or, say, height in basketball, different things.
Mm-hmm.
But in soccer, you know, there are so many different positions, and there are so many different types of players in positions. Like, I'm only 5'4", so I like to tell people I'm 5'5". Um, but and people, if they read my kind of profile, they'd be like, oh, she's quite small. But then on a pitch, you would never know that I'm quite small.
Okay.
Whereas other people are taller or stronger or faster, but there's a place for them on the pitch. There is a place for the smaller, more technical person.
Yeah.
I do think everyone now, though, needs to have a certain level of fitness, whereas 5-10 years ago, the technical player in midfield might not have to run, because they can just stay, or the 10 could just stay in the 10 and not move. Whereas You look at Liverpool men, like every single one of those players is running,
Mm-hmm.
and that's soccer now. You have to be physically fit, and same in Gaelic. Like
Mm-hmm.
Gaelic fitness levels are
Off the
through the
charts.
roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about, I'm always interested as well in culture, and with the Irish senior women's team, especially over the last year, like it just seems with the different sports and sponsors that have come in, there seems to be a really special high performance culture that wasn't always there. We know that from the previous players with their campaigns and stuff. Can you describe the culture that's there at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think for me coming back as a 28-year-old back into the scene after so many years, it's different than maybe say some of the younger girls like Jessu or Emily Whelan who are just 18 coming into the scene, or Jessie Stapleton who was 16. But to me, the culture is, I've known a lot of those girls a long time, but the culture is very open. It's, if you like, you need to show up and you need to be there to work. Otherwise, you won't survive in that culture. But it's not that it's threatening or you know like yeah, definitely, like that's my opinion anyway, is that it's very open. And I think all the girls make, say, or if you came in, you were drafted in, like every player would nearly make like go out of their way to say hello to you,
Yeah,
welcome you to the squad. And then there's 26, 27 players in a camp. You're not going to be best friends with everybody. You're not going to be
yeah,
able to. There's not enough time in the day, and especially with COVID over the last 2 years,
yeah.
people are kind of either in their bubbles or you're kind of in your room a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the professionalism from the girls, and even the changes I've seen in the last 6 years within the team structure, are second to none. Like it's incredible, and it's what stirred me on to try and get back and push myself to get up to that level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the girls taking what they're learning from their professional environments and bringing it back in and demanding. Even when we get certain things in the Irish team, there's no like, oh my goodness, thank you so much, this is incredible. It's like, oh, thanks very much. Also, can we have this? Can we
Yeah,
have this? Because that's what, like, to get
absolutely.
better, we need to demand better. And
Mm-hmm.
you see that happening now across all female sports, and it's great to see. But there is no of like organizations or anyone just kind of giving girls or women stuff to just kind of keep them quiet. There's
Yeah.
very much an attitude in the Irish camp of thank you, but we also we want to get better in this aspect, we want to get better in this. And Katie McCabe is leading the way in that.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing I've kind of noted from it is it seems to be like all of this is very player driven. Like obviously management take into account some of it, but even you saying there, for example, if I was drafted in, everyone comes up to say hello. That
Mm.
isn't the management saying that. That's just the girls taking it upon themselves.
Yeah, that's just the girls, and I suppose senior environments are a little bit different underage, but that's just the girls, and that's just Irish people in general are
Mm.
quite nice. And it's just great to hear, because sometimes you hear from the girls like some of the setups in the UK just are not as friendly and not as welcoming, both
Yeah.
in club and elite level. So yeah, so it's just great to see. But I think from my experience with most teams in Ireland, everyone is very lovely,
Mm-hmm.
and there's always that bit of rivalry between clubs, but then when you actually meet the person, you're like, they're actually very nice.
Even though you hate each other on the pitch or
Yeah.
your clubs. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. And there's a huge social responsibility, I guess, with being an elite level player. Like I was blown away by your fundraiser for Crumlin and Temple Street with the jerseys. Like that's over 10 grand, and I know Sky were gonna donate as well. What's it
Mhm.
like having that social responsibility, and as an elite level player knowing that we're role models now, and we have to act a certain way and promote the sport?
I think with all the recent promotion and media and coverage of the games and stuff, the girl, and like we have Gareth Maher, our media officer, is excellent, and he's given us a lot of education and keeps us aware of things that are kind of evolving or growing around in the country. And I think everybody is taking it with kind of enjoyment as well, and kind of relishing in that profile that that has now been created for us. And absolutely, I think everybody's so willing with their time. Like I can't explain to you how much Katie McCabe does. Like between training, one of the best players in the team, and then all the social media stuff that she has to do, and
Mm-hmm.
things that she has to attend. Like she really is excellent. And it's even now in the last camp, like I think we, all jerseys were signed, booklets are signed, pamphlets are signed, different things, but it's all just, yeah, again, taking that role in society and trying to be those mentors for the young girls coming up. And I think
Mm-hmm.
everyone's enjoying the process so far.
A couple of guests have kind of explained that, particularly at the beginning, it's kind of when someone comes up to you and say, "Oh, you're my hero, you're my role model." How do you find that if a girl comes up to you? Is it kind of weird now being like, I remember looking up to all these players when I was younger, and now I have girls looking up to me.
Yeah, like, and I think it's just great to see, because when I was their age, I had no real female athletes.
Okay.
There was there was a girl in the town, Julianne Hardy, who I loved because she's an absolute baller. No, she was technically she was just class. And in those kind of Wednesday sessions I talked about, she would be there, but she was about 4 or 5 years older than me. But like, kind of at the national level, there is a senior, Ciara Grant, who was the captain of Ireland for a long time. So I think I kind of idolized her, but mainly just for her namesake. No, but I would never have seen her play, until I was
Yeah,
maybe 18, 19.
yeah,
But yeah, no, it's great. And like the kids they're gas. They're so funny and stuff they be asking for you. And I have your shin guard, and you're like, you really do not want my shin guard.
that's gas. That's so random as well. The shin guard, like.
Oh, anything like your hair brand, and you're like, no, no, you don't. Hair bob, I need my hair tied up.
Brilliant. And in terms of like studying medicine and working in a hospital and then football, like is there any sort of transferable skills that you've seen that's kind of benefited you both or benefited you in both areas?
Yeah, so again, back to the organizational stuff in the hospital, like, you start your day and you have a litany of jobs you need to get done. So prioritizing, organizing that, communication skills is pretty much, massive in the hospital, be that talking to your colleagues, patients, or, kind of getting things done. And then just dealing under pressure and dealing under stress, like both can be very stressful environments. And you just have to have a clear head in both those situations. So, yeah, I think definitely starting my internship, I was probably a bit more equipped for the stress than maybe some of my colleagues starting who hadn't played in kind of elite level sport.
Yeah.
And then also sometimes just seeing the both, like, when you're having a bad day in football, you're just kind of like, look, life can be a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
This is trivial compared to what other people have going on. And that was sometimes a good way to think about things when you're having an off day in training or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I think sport in general, or the skills you learn in any type of sport environment, will transfer to any career you choose.
Did you use both as sort of an outlet for one another? Like, obviously, medicine would maybe cancel out football, and football would cancel out medicine.
Yeah, definitely in college. I think it was I found my own kind of nice way of doing things, and yeah, it worked out well for myself. But then just at the end, it was just getting, it was too much. Things were because like the game was getting so elite, and then college was obviously ramping up with intensity as well.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't balance both. But definitely, as in the earlier years, it was a good balance.
What do you think is the biggest lesson you've learned from sport so far in your career?
You're not too old to do anything. um, Lesson learned in sport. Yeah, I literally think that you can achieve like whatever you want to achieve, you will achieve it, and you might not get there as quick as the person next to you, but if you really want it, you will get it. And or if you don't get it, and you know that you've given everything you've like can to get it,
Yeah.
then I think you can be happy with that as well because sport is competitive. It's elite. It's the next person beside you is just as talented, if not more talented than you. And I think even that high performance podcast, like, yeah, some of these people that they're talking to are not the best in the room.
Yeah.
We're not the best in the room for a long time, but we're the hardest working. And even growing up, some of the players that would have played with underage who never got a chance until maybe 16, 17 and are now, either playing senior football or, whatever they're doing because they got it and kept working hard.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Can you describe the mentality that's required? I'm going to call you a high performer because you've done it in multiple fields at this point. Like, I've just fascinated by like sort of like I've kind of asked guests for like a checklist of what it takes to be at that level, and for you particularly across multiple areas.
So sorry, what was the
sorry?
question?
So it's kind of like can you describe the mentality or the attributes that you need to be a high performer?
Okay. So hardworking, clever in a sense that you do what you need to do, not what everyone else is doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What else? Organized, and then kind of not too hard on yourself as well.
Yeah.
I think you need to have you need to be a little bit humble as well, and just if you're having a bad day, you are just a person. You're having a bad day. Give yourself a break. Don't go crazy. I really hate the ethos in the GAA of train hard for 10 months of the year and party hard for 2 months. Like that is just not sustainable.
Yeah.
It leads to so many different issues within the GAA, and addicting issues in the GAA as well, I think. Whereas I always like to have a balance, and I know it's very cliche of the work hard, play hard. But I used to always in college book myself like a gig. I love live music, so like I book something every 3 months, or every 10
cool.
weeks.
Yeah.
And I'd be looking forward to, and then I'd be like, work hard now, and then you're going to have a nice night, on Friday, or going out for dinner, or something that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
If it is just going out for dinner with some of my good friends, things like that. Like even I had assignment due yesterday, but I was going to Dermot Kennedy last night, so I was like, get it done, and then you're going to go to a gig.
Yeah, love it.
So that's kind of the way I like to motivate myself sometimes too.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Overall, from everything you've learned and across all areas, I'm interested in this answer, but what would be your definition of success?
Orly, you should have given me some time. Definition of success. Well, that is a hard one. I think there's a fine line, like to be achieving what you want to achieve, but also pushing yourself to be the best that you can be. Okay. So success would be reaping the rewards for your hard work, not really, because you can be successful and not trying, but I think to be truly successful as an individual within a team environment is to be reaping the rewards of kind of the hard work you've put in.
Love it. I'm going to move on to the sideline 7, and you've just reminded me that I didn't send you these. So basically, it's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. They're either thought-provoking or fire round, whatever way you want to go with it. So I apologise now that I didn't send them to you. Question 1, what is your favourite quote?
Oh, these really should have been sent. So the one I always say jokingly, but I actually do love, is from Finding Nemo, and it's Dory's "Just Keep Swimming."
Love it.
And if things are going, pear-shaped, I always just kind of start singing to my friends, usually to wind them up. But I think it's just keep going is really what it's saying, but in a Dory way.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Soul?
Yes, actually.
Do you like the one where about the ocean? Do you remember that bit? It's near the end of the movie, and it's after he goes through all of that stuff, and he finally gets to the gig, and he leaves the gig, and he's like, "This is it." And she says the story about the little fish, and he goes to the older fish, and he says, "Where's the ocean?" The older fish is like, "You're in the ocean." He's like, "No, I'm not. I haven't arrived." But it is like, but it's kind of funny to just keep swimming. But it's like, remember when you're swimming that you're like, it's about the now. It's not about the ocean. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Question 2, best sporting event you've been to?
That I've been to. So I went over to watch the FIFA World Cup in 2019 over in Nice, and it was incredible because I think it was the first time I've been at like a female, led event like that, and it was just ecstatic. Like the atmosphere around the city at the games. Oh, it was honestly, it was brilliant.
Which game did you go to?
We went to 2 or 3 games. The best one I went to was the Scotland-England game because so many people were there, and it was just mighty crack. Like the Scots are mad, and it was a great game. And Kim Little and Eris Cuthbert would be 2 of my favorite players as well. And it was brilliant.
Deadly.
Really good.
I went to Paris to the US game versus Colombia, and with my friend, and it was unreal. And again, it was all female, but it was actually gas because we booked our tickets really early. And we got to the stadium, and we were kind of walking down the aisles, and we were like, I go to my friend, I was like, oh my God, we're in the front row. Because we had booked it that early that we were like the first people in the whole stadium to book the tickets. So we had great seats, but it was a great tournament. Like, it was really good.
Actually, the weirdest thing happened to me. So I was staying in a hostel, kind of in like a room of 8 people or something by myself. Yeah. And there was about 6 of us there, and I think we had 5 tickets or something like that. And then this guy had just like come out, I think he was just in from a run or something. He was kind of chatting to me, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm going to the game tonight." And it was the I think the France-England game, France-Norway. I can't remember what game it was, which I really should. France anyway. But he was saying that he was like, "Oh, do you need a spare ticket?" And I was like, "Oh, actually I do." And then he was like, "Oh, look," he's like, "I'm over here on a business trip, and like my girlfriend was meant to come. She's not here. Do you want this ticket?" And I was like, "Perfect." So I text the group being like, "Have the final ticket. We're all sorted." So we went down to the beach then, and I was opening up the tickets, and I was like, "What is going on?" So I had my individual ticket that I
Yeah.
had bought,
Yeah.
and then this guy had given me his ticket, and weren't the two seats right beside each other? And I was like, "No way! Like this
That's
is not
so funny.
like this cannot like this is serendipity to another level." And I was like what is happening? And yeah, rightly
That's
so. Went into
crazy.
the station and he was sitting there, and I was like, "This is very very weird."
That's
It was
gas.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was
Is there any particular sporting event on your bucket list?
Ooh, I'd love to go see the Lions tour, and I'd also love to go to Champions League final.
Unreal. Yeah, very
Yeah.
good. Question 3. What's been the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Um, so just kind of injuries. At the I get so I played under 19s Ireland for 5 years, which
Wow.
yeah,
Jesus.
I was a baby when I joined. I think I was just 15, and I played pretty much most of the games, especially in the last 3 games. And then for our last ever game, my manager dropped me. We should have qualified for the finals, but we didn't. And this game was kind of we were playing Serbia. We weren't going to qualify.
Okay.
And he didn't speak to me. He didn't tell me why. There was no communication whatsoever. I was vice captain, and it was just all very strange. And I suppose then when like I'm a very logical person, and when things that happen that aren't logical, it was very hard to take. Or just even the end of my underage international career ended like that. He
Yeah.
didn't put me on. He didn't look at me like it was very. It was I don't know what was going on, but it was very strange and still has not been settled as what happened. But I suppose for me then it was kind of, and then you finish your underage career and you're kind of like, what am I doing next? Obviously seniors is seniors, but like, that's kind of, dream stuff.
Mm.
And then, coincidentally, I kind of done my MCL a little bit after that. So I kind of had two little setbacks within, a couple of weeks. But then fast forward a year or 14 months later, and I made my first cap for Ireland. So I think that time in my life was a time where I was like, right, Ciara, you've not that, you've worked hard to get here, but like you haven't really worked hard. You've got here
Yeah.
doing what you do and just doing it. Whereas now you need to knuckle down. And that's when I started really working with my S&C coach, and just get myself stronger and fitter. And yeah, with the aim to get back in the Irish team, and it happened. So I think that was probably the biggest setback.
Mm-hmm.
And then just, taking the step out and trying to get back into football as well. Like there are kind of different challenges, but yeah, so there's been a few, but just always with the goal in hand and trusting the process.
Mm. When you did take a break from football, and you kind of mentioned earlier a little bit about kind of just it becoming a chore, and you said about playing all your life, and unfortunately that's something I'm going through a little bit with Gaelic football at the moment. And for me, I'm finding it a little bit upsetting that I've done this thing since I was 4. All I wanted to do was play football, and I'm falling out of love with it. Did you find that really upsetting that you've put so much time into it, and now it's like, well, was it a waste? Did you ever find that at all?
Yeah, like, even making that decision to step away, I was obviously kind of mental turmoil for the months leading up to it, because I knew I was kind of like, I wasn't happy playing football. I didn't really want to go to games. Like I absolutely loved my teammates, but I was just like, I'm here for the crack. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it's a weird transition to go through, because you're like, what is happening? Like, why is this happening? But then I think, again, looking back on it, like stressors outside of football as well, you need to think about it. It's not just football, it's what's going on with your life at the moment. So like,
Yeah.
or even the team environment, the team setup, like sometimes like a lot of girls, I think in Gaelic, that I've been talking to over the last year, so in county and club level, the pressure is insane. And like it's
Yeah.
an amateur sport. They're asking a lot of people to train like they're full-time athletes. And maybe the joy is being sucked out of it a little bit. Yes, that is high level sport, but it's at some level or at some stage it's going to have to give, where people are just enjoying it, and you don't have to be, you
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
like as you said, if you don't want to go running for 2 hours on a Thursday, maybe that's what you need to do,
Yeah.
because that's a busy week you're having. But then, there's just a lot of elements to it. But, it's not a nice phase to go through, but I would definitely open up and talk to other people, because you'd be surprised about how many people are going through the same thing as
Yeah.
well.
That's the biggest thing I've noticed, and I know a couple of my friends are exact same as what you just said. Just the pressure gets too much. Question 4: what's been your biggest achievement on or off the pitch?
Biggest achievement to me personally was getting back on the Irish jersey for the Georgia game. And yeah, and then off the pitch is probably, becoming a qualified doctor.
Yeah.
There's no doctors in my family. I don't think anybody, or even myself at times, thought it could happen. So yeah, that's, you know.
Where does being on the late rank then? How does that go into it?
Um, that's probably up there with all the Irish grannies and mammies and aunties to do that. No, yeah, that was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Um, what advice would I give my 18-year-old self? Maybe don't try and do it all. Be in the moment a little bit more than thinking about the next step.
Brilliant. Who would be your dream dinner guest and why? And you can open up the table to a few people if you want.
Okay, dream dinner guests. Roy Keane, definitely, just for the sheer crack.
Yeah.
And then maybe some guests to rile him up as well. So no, Roy Keane, I've always wanted to. Emma Hayes, the Chelsea manager, I would absolutely love to talk to. Her mind blows me away. And yeah, maybe them two to start with, and then I'd have to think.
Brilliant. Very
yeah.
good. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
Part 2.
Part 2. Okay, because I was going to say this is probably the toughest one. And I didn't send it to you. What's the next? What's part 2 then? What's to come?
Football. Maybe football. Over career, or football over medicine. So maybe the last 8 years has been medicine over football, and this one would invert and football over medicine.
Brilliant. Ciara, look, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this. Very best of luck on and off the pitch going forward, and I'm looking forward to keeping in touch.
Thanks very much, Orla. Really, really enjoyed it.
A massive thank you to Ciara for joining me on the podcast today. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat and I personally took a lot away from it. I just want to wish her the very best of luck with everything on and off the pitch and as she travels to Scotland to play with Rangers Football Club. If you are enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as it does help the show grow. Thanks as always for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.